Music down, please. All right, welcome everyone to this panel discussion on the future of cross-border payments in a rapidly evolving world. We have our esteemed panel in front of us. This panel discussion is being moderated by Ms. Geetika Raheja, Executive Director, Payments Transformation at PwC India. And on the panel, we have Mr. Vishal Motwani, Head of Customer Solutions, India and South Asia for SWIFT. Mr. Neel, Tamrakar, Director, GPS. Mr. Rishi, Patel, Founder and CEO, Interpolitan Money. Mr. Nath Parmeshwaran, Senior Director, Corporate Affairs and Board Member, India for PayPal. And Mr. Amit Talwar, EVP and Head Transaction Banking Sales at IndusInd Bank. Let's welcome them with a round of applause, everyone. And over to you for the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure we are all very excited to be standing in between you and lunch, or hopefully you've had lunch, and we can keep this interesting enough for you all to stick around after lunch. So our topic for the day is future of cross-border remittances and how that is going to look like a few years from now. We have a very exciting panel here. We're looking to, explore themes like innovation, collaboration, regulation, and of course competition as well, right? India is clearly poised for a lot of growth right now in this space. We're the largest inward remittance, acceptor in the world. Outward remittances are also growing at a steady pace. A lot of tech initiatives being launched. We're looking at, bill payments which are accepted cross-border now. We're looking at UPI, which is starting to get accepted. SWIFT is coming out with new innovations regularly. So all in all, I think it is an inflection point for the Indian payments ecosystem with respect to cross-border payments. But let's find out from our panelists if really there is a lot to look forward to in this space. So let's get started. Neel, over to you in terms of a lot of talk around CBDC, a lot of discussions around how that will probably be the game changer, right? How are you looking at this space? Do you think it really is what it promises to be?
Thank you, Geetika. Glad to be here as a panelist to speak about a few words that I know. CBDC is being talked about globally. It is going to be a game changer for sure. But in Nepal, we are struggling to get into the digitization of the payment system. Like 16 to 18% of the total transactions actually happen in digital form in Nepal. Only 16 to 18%. So we are still to go a long way for digitization, complete digitization. And GPS, Global Gateway Payment Service, as a company, we are trying to get into the business so that we can, demonetize the economy in Nepal. Like we are trying to provide a network which is secure, safe, hassle-free, and easy for all the stakeholders in Nepal. In the process, we are really very happy to have NPCI International to collaborate with to bring in UPI system in Nepal. You see, the digital payment system in Nepal is being hindered by few obstacles like standardization, interoperability, the innovation, reach to the consumers. All these obstacles, the reluctance of the people, consumers, for the security purpose, and all these hindrances we intend to overcome by deploying UPI in Nepal, which is already proven in India. So once we have the digital payment system like widely accepted in Nepal, then only we can think about CBDC. So CBDC, obviously, we're gonna eradicate the gray economy from the world. It's gonna eradicate corruptions and the money laundering, of course, the criminal funding. See, all these the the dark sides of the society is going to be overcome by this CBDC, we hope, but we still have a long way to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Neel. So I think we spoke about some of the other innovations, right? Like UPI, ground level changes that are happening. But I think there are a lot of fintechs which are doing a lot of work in this space. We've seen, corridors springing up. We've seen new innovations coming out in this space on the customer experience side, on the trust side. So let's find out, I think, from Rishi. How do you see this space evolving globally? Also, how do you see it India vis-a-vis the global counterparts?
So first of all, I mean, I represent Interpolitan Money. Thank you for having me here. We've been operating across the UK-India corridor in particular over the last 3 to 4 years, and it's been evolving at a rapid pace. At the beginning of this year, we opened our India office, and I'm delighted to say, in the recent weeks, we've decided to really double down on our investments here. We see the India outbound corridor as one of the most exciting payment corridors in existence today. Globally. It's full of challenges. It's certainly not straightforward, but ultimately it's an evolving space, and there seems to be significant capital looking to enter the international markets, and we really want to be here to service that requirement. It seems that policy is also evolving. It's again, we've seen from the RBI's perspective, it's never been straightforward. It's a fairly conservative approach, but ultimately we think that change is likely to happen in the near future. So we're looking forward to being part of that.
Great. But I think you made an important point there, Rishi, in terms of there's a lot of talk about inbound so far in India, but you're saying that outbound is equally exciting, and that's another space that you're very keen to explore in the future, right? Great. Vishal, from your perspective, like SWIFT has been synonymous with cross-border, right, for a while now. What does innovation mean to you? Like, what are you all looking at in terms of enhancing, in a system that's been around that long? So.
Thanks, Geetika. Hi, this is Vishal. I lead customer solutions for SWIFT for the India subcontinent. To me, I think this is the most exciting time to be at SWIFT. A lot of things are changing. The way we are looking at business is changing. There are a couple of initiatives that we are working on as incumbents. One of the biggest challenges that we realized when we stepped back from our BAU and we started looking at what is it that we can change on the customer experience side. And what was revealed to us was that at least 5% of all transactions fail on STP, and that costs bankers a lot, to the tunes of $2 billion. That's big money, just because of failures or because of STP, right? And that's something that we feel can be solved with pre-validation. So just by checking that an account exists, there is a account holder to it, the account is active, just by those simple checks, you could bring those losses down by almost 60 to 65%. So that's one of the big initiatives where we are trying to nudge our banks to use pre-validation. The second thing is something which you might already be aware of, which is GPI. Now GPI is, we are bringing GPI to low ticket transactions, which means that your traceability, observability, transparency around these will improve. We've seen numbers improve in terms of the time it takes for transactions to get completed. We've seen that improve drastically with GPI. We see a good bit of transactions being completed within 5 minutes, and most of the transactions being completed within 30 minutes. And our hope is to see the same effect with the small ticket items. And the third is ISO. It's a large transformation that's happening in the payment space. I think everybody is gearing towards the November 2022 timeline. And if you look under the hood in terms of where SWIFT is going, we are going API. We are dominantly message-based, but you will see that shift very soon towards API. We've already started with the new services. And then from an infrastructure perspective, our ambition is to go plug and play, which is clearly not the case today, but that is the vision. And hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years, you will see that getting executed, that bankers have those options to do a plug and play with Swift.
Interesting insights there, Vishal. Thanks. Amit, from your perspective, we're hearing a lot about UPI going global. We're hearing about cross-border bill payments being enabled. We heard about a lot of tech initiatives from Vishal here, right? So there is a lot of talk around tech, right? But how are you looking at the customer aspects around this? Are you seeing new corridors emerging? Are you seeing the traditional corridors just picking up more traction? US, UK, Singapore, or how are you, Middle East? What do you think is the next few years hold in terms of customer migration?
Yeah, thanks, Geetika. So I think I'll take the first question first, which is around the innovation and how it impacts the customers who are typically the users in the cross-border space. So the key considerations that come to mind of a remitter when deciding on a cross-border payment typically are what does it cost me to send money? How quickly can I send money? Is it safe, secure? How convenient is it for me to do the transaction, etc.? So these are 3 or 4 sort of key considerations. And if you look at the innovations, a lot of them led by NPCI in the last few quarters, all seem to be making or bringing out efficiencies on the points that I talked about. So whether it's UPI, UPI, there are 2 things that are happening, which have been initiated over the last 12 to 18 months. One is NPCI taking UPI global from a transaction completion perspective, in the sense that an Indian who is on UPI with NPCI having tied up with entities outside India can possibly go and use the same facility for making payments overseas. B is enabling payments with UPI as a payout mode in India, which means essentially the remitter doesn't need to, or the beneficiary doesn't need to expose the bank details, the remitter doesn't need to know the complete bank details. Virtual handle is good enough. Now, what does it do typically is, a lot of the second part, which is to more around the inward remittances coming to the country, is it's payout mode that is 24/7, 365. It gets in money instantly. You don't have to worry about exposing your bank details. It's safe, secure in that sense. There is an opportunity for the ecosystem to be able to pre-validate the handles and make sure the money is going to the right account, it doesn't go elsewhere. So, the remitter is at peace when you're using these kind of payout modes, or they choose these kind of methods to send money back into India. On the first part of enabling UPI for acquiring, of course, today, if as a tourist, so we travel to UK or we travel to Singapore, travel to UAE, invariably we either carry currency with us or we carry a travel card with us. But with acceptance of UPI across these markets, one doesn't really need to bother so much about doing that. And that effectively also has an impact on the overall cost of moving money across borders. So that's one part. BBPS, again, the same stuff. I mean, traditionally, we've supported bill payments under the rupee drawing arrangement scheme of RBI from outside India into India. And it's essentially been sort of a 2-step process where a remitter would first credit their NRE account here and then do a domestic transfer to be able to pay the bills. But with BBPS going cross-border now, I think the remitter has an option and an opportunity to walk into any of the licensed partners that work with an Indian bank and are plugged into the BBPS ecosystem, do a fetch and pay, get to know the exact amount they need to pay. There are thousands of billers that are active on BBPS ecosystem today. About 20,000 plus is from the last number I heard. They can do a real-time payment. They can pay the exact amount right to the last rupee. Don't have to worry about this being a 2-step process. It's a simple, seamless, straightforward process with a confirmation of the payment also going back to the remitter via an SMS and a receipt being available. So it makes life much easier, simple. And also, I think the overall cost of doing a remittance would be much lower, considering that's going to be a part of the entire BBP ecosystem as we look at. So those are from an innovation perspective, and it's a win-win from a customer perspective, because if you look at the key considerations, it seems to be ticking all those boxes in terms of speed, in terms of cost, in terms of convenience, etc., etc. Yeah. Coming back to the second question around the corridors and changing trends, I think as you guys have already touched upon the fact that while India has predominantly been seen as an inward market all these years, last decade or so has seen a huge jump in terms of the monies that leave the country in terms outbound from India. Back in 2012-13, I recollect the overall retail LRS payments, as you know them, were about $1 billion a year. And now if you look at the quantum that goes out, I think 2020 was approximately 18 billion. Last year was a bit of a dip because of perhaps COVID. But if you look at this year again, we average about $2 billion a month. So we're looking at, approximately 20 to 24 billion being sent out of the country, hopefully, if the trend remains and it holds through the year. So that's a big shift. And the primary purposes we see some of these monies going out of an LRS are, education, it is travel, and travel does include a bit of, other purposes as well. There is some bit that's going out as gifting from Indians to their relatives overseas, and there's of course maintenance money is also going out. So essentially, the geographies that these monies are going out today sort of go on and define the corridors that could be of interest to us tomorrow. We've seen the trend change. I was reading one of the articles recently which talked about historically MENA, Middle East region, had contributed about, in 2017 was about 53% of the inbound coming into India. Now it's less than 30%. One of the primary reasons is because, let's say, about 6 lakh students leave India every year to study abroad. A lot of them go into North America, they go into parts of Europe, the UK, Germany, and then Australia. A is the quality of education, B, I think, is the work opportunities. So people who go as students today and their immigration policies are flexible and welcoming, eventually they go on and they settle down in those countries and they become remitters. So that's the way, I look at things. You are sending a lot of money out of the country. It's going into geographies which are today very pro-immigration. They are welcoming Indian students. And these are going to be the geographies where you will see, far more money coming into the country as we go along, as been seen in the recent past as well.
Thanks, Amit. Interesting points there on all fronts, on the tech as well as the migration impacting the flows as well, right? And then that's where I think a lot of the innovation also needs to focus then on those corridors. So a lot of the things that we spoke about before this was around retail, right? A lot of focus overall in the payment space has been on retail. But increasingly, we are seeing a shift towards SMEs. We are seeing a shift towards businesses, right? So not who better than you to tell us what's the exciting stuff on the SME and the businesses side. Is that equally interesting, that space? Are we seeing a lot of traction on the tech side there? Yeah.
Thanks for having me here. I think while a lot has been talked about on P2P payments, inbound, outbound, before I make my remarks or share my views, I want to ask the audience here, how many of you have heard about, Sri Ganganagar and Tenkasi? These are two towns in India. So a few people, have heard about them. Okay, what is common about this is Sri Ganganagar is a border town near Pakistan, and Tenkasi is a temple town in south of India. What is common here is MSMEs, freelancers, okay, who either export merchandise, okay, or offer services to the global audience. They are now able to access a global opportunity, okay, sell their goods and services and receive payments like PayPal as a platform, for example, right? So what we are absolutely fascinated and very fortunate to be associated is a few lakh such, small service and goods exporters from India, both exporting goods and services. We are able to work with them, bring in the trust, open up the market for them across our 400, 500 million users worldwide in 200 countries. Okay, that's the opportunity that we are laser focused on. And we believe, we are probably, day one of a test match. The test match has just begun. Uh, that is the opportunity that India is sitting on, and we are very early. Uh, what we are seeing is, even during COVID, lakhs and lakhs of such small merchants, okay, are able to have come back very strongly and continue to export made in India goods and services. What it is driving, if you see from a larger perspective, is inclusion, exports, foreign exchange earnings, which go back into creating livelihoods, both direct and indirect, okay, address to some extent our trade deficit, right? This is extremely, while the ticket size may be very small, this really adds to the SME sector, which all of us know act as the backbone for India's economy. Okay, why I'm saying that we are very bullish is we are seeing very early days. We have about 63 odd million SMEs in India. Okay, a very small percent of them is actually digitized. Number two, ready for international trade. Okay, so that's what we are looking at. Now, another data point which might be very useful for the audience here is, not very well known. Okay, the freelancer community in India, like our big IT counterparts, is absolutely a leader when it comes to exporting services. Uh, I don't know how many of you know, there is a latest report of the International Labour Organization. Out of every four freelancers in the world, one of them is from India, which means we already have a 25% market share. When we talk about per billing rate, which is how they are measured when they seek work from overseas gig platforms or consumers, okay, we are among the highest in terms of $80 to $100 per hour of work. So our quality of service, our English-speaking skills, our ability to take care of the overseas users and in return get a very good value is kind of, showcased there. So that's the kind of opportunity we are talking about. When we talk about Geetika innovation, we have to give credit to people who generally don't get the credit. Okay, here first start with the regulator. Reserve Bank of India, 10 years back, they had the foresight to actually build a purpose-built regulation for small value export of goods and services called OPGSP. Okay, it has allowed these kind of small exporters to link to platforms like PayPal, go through an omni-channel, whether they want to sell through website, social media, overseas marketplaces, and get remittance into the country. Of course, there is RDS and another channel for payouts as well. So foresight of the regulator. Not again very well spoken is the role of the government. We, for a long time, have been working with the government. There is a new foreign trade policy on the anvil. Most likely, we are going to see a completely new chapter on e-commerce-led exports. Okay, and this is focused both on B2B and B2C. Okay, so let's wait for what the government rolls out. What they've already done is, behind the scenes, allow small value shipments through couriers, which was a huge problem before. Earlier things used to go as samples, now it can go as a commercial shipment, which means even one sari, one carpet, one piece of jewelry can actually go out through a courier, and these exporters will get the same benefits as any other exporter in the country. Faceless customs, for example, DGFT running 24/7. Okay, IC codes being registered online free of cost. So a number of innovation and trade, tailwinds are supporting this kind of an export focus the last 3-4 years, which is an absolute welcome sign. So I would say that this is a fascinating area around trade payments, small value exports, and of course there is a whole B2B chapter, which I think in the interest of time we should be covering it later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nath. Great insight in terms of all the other factors which are affecting trade and SMEs in India as well, right? And then I think Nath touched upon a very interesting point around regulation, right? You cannot complete a discussion on payments in India without speaking about regulations. So let's find out from our panelists, is it a double-edged sword? How is it working for them? Rishi, I know you're passionate about this. So do come in and give us your views on, MTSS, LRS, FEMA, and are they keeping in pace with all the innovation that we spoke about?
Thanks, Geetika. So right now, I think not, or not quite. We're not quite there at the moment. But it's really important to understand what it is we're asking for. It's not policy change. It's not deep policy change here. What it is access. You've got an environment where banks can play at one level here, and sort of A2 licensed entities or fintechs have to play at another level. And that's the underlying problem. If you really want competition to thrive, you have to enable fintechs and non-bank providers to actually play at the same level. So it's essentially enabling unrestricted access. Great examples are, I guess, in the UK and the EU, where fintechs have been able to directly connect onto, say, the faster payment network, and in the EU on the SEPA payment network. And that's actually where you see significant macro change. You see consumers being able to access multiple products, and you see different markets open up from an economic perspective. So I think it's really important that actually that lobbying continues, and you know, I'm hopeful that in the coming years we will see this change at the RBI level.
I think this has been a point of discussion for a while now, and I think we've seen the regulator take steps in the direction, right? UPI today, there is a concept of TPAPs and you know, entities who can access the ecosystem, not directly yet, yes. Although there has been access enabled for you know, other central payment systems for non-bank entities, that has started. So, and I think that's how the Indian regulator typically works, right? It works in stages. You may not see a big bang regulation around it, but you may see some steps which may eventually lead to the ask here, right? And then that sort of links, I think, Nath, if do you think there's an ask from the industry overall to the regulator in this space? Rishi mentioned something, but do you want to just come and link to the point that he mentioned?
So the way up, you know, I think I think you were alluding to this point, you know, we have to have a lot of patience when it comes to, you know, such developments, right? A lot of work has been happening on this front, but we'll have to work together to kind of, you know, be in touch with the regulator. And in most cases, they have started responding in a very favorable way. So a couple of things that I see as opportunities for us to work is the regulatory sandbox is already out. There is a specific theme around cross-border, you know, payments as an cohort. Now it is on tap now. So if we have any areas for experiment, then we can go in and do it. Now the next cohort is a theme neutral cohort. Again, it is up to us to see how we leverage that. Number two, I think the RBI teams are very much open to kind of engaging the industry and have a dialogue on what is required to kind of enable it, but within the boundaries of, they would say, Rishi, as you would agree, you know, customer protection, safety of the Indian user, you know, cyber security, those things. So I think there is an opportunity for us to have a dialogue. People on the other side are very much open to listening. If you also saw what the FM said, is that she wants actually the fintech industry to come and engage more and more with the government too. So there is an opportunity here for us to kind of, you know, go and engage. I would say one area that we have created in Payment Council of India is a dedicated working committee around international remittance and trade payments. You know, many of you, we are all together there. So, you know, if we can kind of, you know, use that forum and, you know, kind of, you know, put our suggestions and also solutions, yeah, I think we have a great opportunity to go and, you know, work with and get some sort of a win-win kind of an approach. That's how I would put it.
Thanks, Nath. Thanks. In terms of Vishal, I think the primary objective of the regulator has been transparency and trust, right? And I think in a cross-border segment, that is probably more important than most other segments as well, right? How do you think the industry is looking at that? And you know, are there regulations? Is that a tech challenge to solve? Is that a regulation challenge to solve?
So look at the cross-border space, right? The point is that you will have multiple regulators looking at the same transaction, right? So here are a few things that, I mean, tech can solve regulatory challenges, right? So if you look at what's going to happen in that space, one thing that comes to my mind is ISO 20022. So what's going to happen with that is that we are moving from an MT-based messaging to a ISO 20022 based messaging. And what that means in layman's term is that it's now much more cheaper to send and receive messages than it was many decades ago. So which means that now the richness in the data will be almost 8 to 10 times more than what it is today. So that as a byproduct of that, it means that regulators will find it much easier to call upon information from the banks, right? So it gives regulator more control, and it makes it easy for the bank also to demonstrate how they are compliant. And as you mentioned, one of the things that's always on the back of the mind of the regulator is that it will always side with the end customer. It will look for more transparency in terms of rates, for example, right? And that's something which I think can be achieved with GPI, for example, right? So going forward, you will see that a customer sees upfront what are the charges he or she is going to pay, what is the FX charge that he or she is going to pay. So that transparency helps the entire ecosystem. It helps banks to be more competitive. It gives the end benefit to the customer, and it also gives some peace of mind to the regulator that there is a fair level playing field for all the banks.
Great. Amit, how do you think collaboration is working for the industry today? It's one of those segments which has a lot of, it's a fairly diversified segment. There are a lot of players. Everyone commands their share in this pie. How do you think it works for fintechs, MTOs, schemes, and banks?
Well, I think there was a lot of talk around banks versus fintechs a few years back, and there's real apprehension around, are fintechs going to take away the businesses from us? Can they operate independently? Do they require banks? Do they don't require, etc. But I think if I look at the cross-border space today, Geetika, and I look at specifically with the reference to India, I think the regulators have done a fantastic job in terms of defining the roles and responsibilities, use that word, in terms of who can do what in this space. And by virtue of having a fairly well-defined policy and set of directions, be it rupee drawing arrangements, be it the MTSS scheme, be it the OPGSP, or be it the traditional wire, etc., etc. I think it's clear that there is place for everybody. Earlier, it used to be predominantly exchange houses and MTOs for sending money from outside. I think fintechs have taken a fair share of origination, if I use that phrase. And they've also acted as aggregators to be able to pump in. And that has made a little bit of difference in terms of the customer experience on the send side. It's made possibly an impact on the pricing, the cost of remittance as well. So all the considerations talked about earlier, I think it's made an impact on each of those. I've seen some of the large MTOs sort of reinvent themselves to be, act more like fintechs. I read somewhere, I think MoneyGram used to get about 2% transactions on digital 10 years back. Today it's about almost close to 50%, some 45% or so. So it's that, the players on the send side are also reinventing themselves. So there is space for fintechs, there's space for money transfer operators who've traditionally been brick and mortar. But banks are pretty much an integral part of the entire journey. I don't think it's a case of fintech versus or MTO versus bank. It is fintech collaborating with a bank or bank collaborating with an MTO, as the case may be. There's still activities that a bank is required to do by law, be it, citing of funds, conversion, FX, the access to local rails here to be able to pay out, etc., etc. So those are things that a fintech or an MTO is dependent, given the current set of guidelines as they are. The opportunity is there for all. I mean, RBI has given some leeway to fintechs to be able to do last mile. Likewise, I've seen a few Indian banks do venture overseas to also capture the origination of these transactions. But I strongly believe, I think each of the players in the ecosystem has their own sweet spot and their strengths, which they are playing to at this point in time. And I see it as more collaborative than competing at this point.
Great. So Neel, coming to you, we can't end a payments discussion also without talking about the shrinking margins, right? Any thoughts around, is that a concern, or are the volumes enough to sustain even the shrinking margins?
Thank you, Geetika. I think the shrinking margin is not a big concern for the service providers, because our main goal is to provide value to the customers. You see, like, let's talk about the cross-border transactions between India and Nepal. There are like 4 million Nepalese living in India, and they are sending out money to Nepal. Like every year, it's around 128 billion rupees. Okay. Now the traditional channels that they are using for remittances, they are like, it costs for these remitters even to access to the point where they are supposed to deliver their cash, their money. And the network infrastructure that the remittance company has to create in India and in Nepal, it's a huge investment, OPEX and CAPEX. So when we do the remittances, with the channel of UPI that we are going to deploy in Nepal, whole of this infrastructure, whole of this CAPEX is going to go down. So the overall benefit that's going to go to is the end consumer. And that is the beauty of digital transactions cross-border. And we at GPS, we believe to collaborate with more and more digital transaction entities in India and abroad, so that we could give more benefit to the end consumers. See, it'll be easier, safer, and cost-effective for the remitters and the receivers. Having said that, like for a company who is providing this service, who is providing this network, we are going to gain on the economy of scale, obviously. On top of that, like, you see, we believe that the margin is a byproduct of the value and service that we provide to our customers. Thank you.
Thanks, Neel. I'm just watching the clock, and I think we're nearing the end of our session. But I think just before we close, we'd like to hear one last parting thought around crystal ball gazing. One trend in the cross-border space, Neel, that you think is really worth looking out for.
Well, I think, Geetika, like, world needs a highway, a digital payment highway for enabling everyone in the world to become digital. And I see that UPI and NPCI and UPI is such platform that can go global. See, it's been so successful in India. Within a span of 10 years, UPI has done magic in India. And now NPCI is reaching out to all different continents and nations. In Nepal, we are deploying UPI switch for the first time outside India. So this is going to prove that UPI can be deployed in other countries, and the network that creates can become a big digital payment highway in the world. And that's, I'm really excited to see that happen. Thank you.
Great. Vishal, your take?
Competition will grow, which is good. Obvious things to look out for is, one, I think the overall cost of doing a cross-border transaction will plummet over the next few years. And also the speed will increase. Today, if it takes days or if minutes, it should take seconds. And I think we are getting there.
Excellent. Amit?
I think I would like to see far more use cases involving blockchain and digital currency, because that is an area which definitely can further bring in efficiencies end to end. And I see cash would continue to decrease as we've sort of seen all along, to be honest. Cross-border, yes. Domestic, it would still be high. Cross-border, I think it's
Excellent. Rishi, where are you putting your money?
Look, I do really believe that we will see some pretty significant changes when it comes to access and opening up of the marketplace. Amit made some really good points around collaboration, and the way I see it is, yes, there will certainly be these ecosystems to play with. Collaboration will continue to grow in this area. But ultimately, the access is the key point for me, and I think if we solve that one, we'll see some seismic changes in this ecosystem.
Nath?
Well, I would start by saying probably if you take a 10-15-year view, cross-border, you always have geographies to deal with. I guess on the back of real-time payment systems, CBDC, blockchain, geography actually could become history here. It will be as easy as transferring to a bank account within the same bank, especially if you add digital identity to the mix as well. So that's a 10-15-year view. In the meanwhile, it will kind of continue to evolve very fast. In the short term, I think to Amit's point about use cases, I think there is a fascinating area of the diaspora, 16 million plus Indians living abroad, gifting, charity donations into the country. Those are use cases to really look at and exploit. It's kind of not looked at very as focused as it should be. And last, I think for a long time to come, I think again I go back to the test match example. Okay, collaboration between fintechs and banks is here to stay, and slowly I think fintechs and banks will find a balance of who is doing good and then work together.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think we had a very exciting discussion today. Spoke about all the innovations around digital currency. We spoke about UPI. We spoke about BBPS. We took the longer term view as well, right? So there is a very strong linkage between demographics and how that changes with how payment flows change, right? So let's watch out for some of these key trends. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thanks.
To the panel, may I request you to please pose for a group photograph.